This video will demonstrate how to create descriptive statistics tables with Excel. The demonstration will use Excel 2013 version. We'll start with creating a table of descriptive statistics for numeric variables. I've loaded into Excel data that comes from the New York State Health Department. It's patient-level data on the cost of hospitalization for heart attacks in central New York for 2014. And we're going to look at two variables in particular, total charges and total costs, columns G and H. Total charges are the amount of money charged to the insurance company for the patient's treatment, and total costs are the costs incurred by the hospital for that patient's treatment. So, to create a table of descriptive statistics, go over here to the data analysis icon, the data analysis tools, and we get this dialog. Highlight descriptive statistics and say OK. And now we'll take the two columns we're interested in, G and H, as the input range. We have labels in the first row, so check that box. We'll put the output in a new worksheet, and then you want to check summary statistics and say OK. So here's the output, and we'll need to do some reformatting, and we'll start by widening the columns so it's easier to see. We don't need all of these statistics for descriptive analysis of the data. So we'll go through line by line and delete what's necessary, or delete what's unnecessary and retain what we need. So standard error is not a descriptive statistic, so we'll delete that row. For a numeric variable, a continuous variable, we don't use the mode. The mode is a measure of centrality for the most frequently occurring value, and we use that when we have discrete measurements, and that's not the case here with money, which is measured on a continuous scale. So we'll delete the mode. Sample variance is the square of the standard deviation. The standard deviation is in the original units, which are dollars, and the sample variance is in units squared. And it's easier for the reader or audience to understand in the original units, so we use standard deviation as a measure of variation, and we'll delete sample variance. Kurtosis and skewness are other properties of the distribution that are not frequently used to describe a data set, so we'll delete those. We'll retain range, minimum, and maximum. And sum is also not usually shown because it's related to the mean. The mean is the sum divided by the number of observations. And in this case, we have 2,388 observations. So we'll delete the sum. So there's the table of descriptive statistics that will be sufficient to describe the data set. The mean and the median are measures of centrality. They express the center of the distribution, and the standard deviation, range, minimum, and maximum express the variation in that distribution. So we'll save that. Next, we'll talk about how to do a descriptive analysis for a categoric variable. Categorical variables are analyzed differently or summarized differently than numeric variables. For example, with gender, it doesn't make sense to have a mean or standard deviation of gender. So for categoric variables, we want to describe them or summarize them as percent in each category. And to do that, we'll use a different method in Excel. We'll use pivot tables. So go to Insert, Pivot Table, and we need to specify a range. So we'll use the 3 categorical variables in columns A, B, and C: age group, gender, and race. So we'll select that range. We'll put our pivot table on a new worksheet and say OK. So now we can drag the fields we've selected into the different zones down here to summarize them. So let's start by looking at the gender variable. We select gender, it automatically puts it across the rows. Drag gender into the values zone, and now you see we get the count by gender. So in this data set we have 963 females and 1,425 males. When you summarize a categorical variable, the appropriate way to do that is by percentage, as a relative frequency. It's easier for the audience to understand. So we can do that by going into any one of the cells where the count is, right-click, show values as, and say percent of grand total. And now it changes from the count to the percentage. So now we see there's 40% of the women in the sample and 60% are men in the sample. So this is the kind of table you create to summarize categorical variables.